Hi, everyone, and welcome to episode 7 of Coloring Outside the Box. And this is, I'm not sure what attempt this is for me to kind of get my brain corralled and it communicating properly with my mouth so that I could actually say something slightly intelligible. Anyways, one of the things that struck me as I was sorting through what I might want to talk about this week, uh, it, and not finding, a space and a place where I felt, yeah, this is it. I realized that there's just so much fluctuation and flux going on right now, and that it might feel like we're just rearranging the deck chart. I said it, chairs again and again and again in our mental body because we're still trying to make sense of what's happening. And I don't mean from a an intellectual sense. I'm fairly certain we could all really clearly illuminate or enumerate or both all the things that have happened in our mental mind over the last several months. And it's not unlike what I said in last week's podcast when I was talking about the energies we're going to be dealing with as we move through the sign of Cancer. Uh, it becomes obvious that we are now being called upon to really be present for our feelings, our emotions, what we sense, not what we feel in each and every moment, not what I think or what I plan or what I want to do. And as I said in the post I made on Facebook last night, we have come to a space and a place where we need to realize that thinking and doing are no longer the only ways that we can nourish ourselves, that we need to be in a feeling, intuiting space in order to really truly connect to who we are. Because really, who we are is what's inside, not necessarily what we present to the world, what we do. Those are the outer manifestation of who we are, but not necessarily who we are. And as we go through this process, it requires that we take a look at what we value. What are our expectations? What truly matters to us in terms of our resources and who we are. Now, the reason I'm talking about this today is because in the next several hours, uh, the planet Venus is going to appear to go direct. And now, of course, um, planets, as they circle the sun, don't really go backwards. They just appear to go backwards to those of us living on the planet Earth. So what does this mean? Well, it means it's time to look inward at what you really think is important, both about yourself. It's about valuing self as much as it is about what are my external values. In other words, do I think it's okay to jaywalk or do I not think it's okay to jaywalk? Now, that might feel very obvious and very simple, but I often give these examples because sometimes we want to make life more complicated than it has to be. And that kind of a thread exists in everything that we choose to do. Because whatever we choose to do demonstrates what we value. Just let that sink in for a second. Because sometimes we don't realize that because we're so busy doing or thinking that we're just responding in the moment or reacting without really being aware of where the impetus or the intent comes from. So over the last several weeks, Venus has been asking us to have a look at those things and to be clear what it is going forward we wish to exemplify, wish we to demonstrate. Is what we do reflective of what we really value? Now, this can often be a catch-22 because life often gives us circumstances in which we have to adapt ourselves. And I know that's true for each and every one of us because it's true for me. Not wishing to box anybody in, because after all, this is supposed to be outside the box. However, sometimes we really need to understand the box we live in before we can figure out whether it's the box that we want to live in, the structure, the space, and the place that truly reflects who we are. And that's what a lot of this year is about. And it's funny because I came across this quote that I really like, and I'm going to share it with you right now. It comes from George Clinton, who is a singer, songwriter, producer, and really strongly connected to the funk music world. And I said that because I'm not sure that that's an appropriate description, but there you go. It really struck me as being highly resonant, is the best way I can put it. And the quote is, "Free your ass and your mind will follow." Now, to me, this is like a piece of poetry. And I'm not going to tell you what it means, because it might mean something completely different to you. But we are in a time when we really do have to free ourselves of many of our habitual patterns, which is often, you know, when the sun is going through Cancer, it's often a really great time to look at your habit patterns and ask yourself, if you have a belief, is that really reflective of who you are or what's important to you? Or is it something that got ingrained in you, or that you learned or drew in through life circumstance? But does it really reflect who you are? Because each and every one of us is born into sets of circumstances which are outside our control, because when you're a small child, everything is really outside your control. So you're immersed in an environment that is designed and dictated by people who are just taller than you, not necessarily wiser, smarter, kinder, more loving than you are. And when I say these things, I mean that just to be a description of reality. Because there isn't a single person on this planet that had a set of parents or a set of guides or a set of people who influenced us who always had their shit together. And as we're going through this period of time and we search our souls, because I think this is a time of searching your soul and yourself, we can come in contact with aspects of our thoughts, our feelings that seem foreign to us, and yet we have lived them for a very long time. And as I pause and I give you time to really think about that, it may bring up a lot of stuff, because this is a year when a lot of stuff gets brought up. And it's not comfortable. It's definitely not designed to create, you know, happiness. However, it can strip away parts of yourself that you've grown in an effort to protect you. And the message this year, very clearly, since most of the energy is very earthy, very watery, can make us feel like we're drowning, we're floundering, we're not standing on solid ground, because the structures of the past don't seem to function in the way that we're used to. And, we keep on hearing the expression new normal. But the reality is, I'm not sure that there is a normal. I think we like to think there is, but in the story of everybody's life, there may not be much normal at all. The challenge we face sometimes is recognizing that we've learned to camouflage or hide things that do not fit the template we've been told is how we should live our lives. My intention is to open the door for you the same way I've opened the door for myself, to find a way to live my life authentically, which means often shifting or changing things that in the past seemed important. And of course, I think it's funny because we often think that what we believed was true when we were 20 years old is still true when we have vintaged in life, when we are 35 or 45 or 55 or 70. But life changes, we change. So trying to build a platform based on something that you thought was true when you were 18 doesn't really work, because it doesn't, what you know when you're 18, what you've experienced when you're 18, and of course it depends on your life experience, and so we could go back farther, but the reality is that if you look back, and I've been doing a lot of that myself this year, looking back and tuning into experiences I had when I was younger, and asking myself what it was I concluded in those periods of my life, what I thought was important, what I think is important now, and if that's changed or if it hasn't changed. And if it hasn't changed, why hasn't it changed? So lots of things that you may value today don't necessarily need a change. They may just need to be re-energized. So say, you really, when you were 10 years old, wanted to be an artist, and life took different pathways. And now at age maybe 40 or whatever, during this period of time, during COVID-19, we've had to be more creative in terms of how we spend our time. And it's funny because, where was I? I was trying to think. Oh, yeah, I was getting my nails done. And I noticed that my nail tech had a picture of her puppy on the wall. And I said, "Oh, did you draw that?" And she said, "Oh, no, a friend of mine drew that." I said, "Wow, she's really talented." I said, "Not only did she capture the way your puppy your looks," I call dogs puppies, I don't know why. She captured the essence of her dog. And that takes real talent. And I said, "Oh, so has she always been an artist?" "Oh, no, she just started doing this during COVID-19. So as we, investigate or open the doors to things that we may have valued or thought were important when we were younger that we didn't have the opportunity to pursue, or whether we look at things we valued when we were 25 and realize, wow, that doesn't really matter to me anymore, we have an opportunity to see how we grow and change, and how also we can go back and return to things that were valuable to us when we were younger, and now we have an opportunity to be able to do that, to explore those things. Because that's what a shift in taking a look at our values allows us to do. Now, that was an awkward sentence, and maybe I should find a slightly better way to put it. In other words, following our heart's desire is connected to what we value. And sometimes what we value gets lost. And I mean what we personally value, what's inside us, not the value of our job or anything, but what's inside us? Do we value our capacity to be slightly wacky? Do we value our capacity to solve problems without just based on intuition? Do we value the part of us that uh, instinctively knows when someone's in pain, or have we been told to mind our own business? Do we understand always how to use the resources, the talents that we have? Because Venus is as much connected to talents as it is to resources, to the parts of ourselves that we can call on to solve problems, make a great lemon pie. Yeah, apparently my brain is failing me at this particular moment in time. My apologies. Anyway, so I'm feeling a little discombobulated, I have to admit, and I really do hope that this makes sense. Of course, I will listen to it when I'm done and make sure it makes sense. And if it doesn't, I'll have to do it again. And I really, really, really don't want to do that. So as we zero in on what we value, you know, here's a little exercise. It seems that every week I don't plan to, it just kind of happens organically. Give you a little exercise. So I want you to think about the things that gave you joy when you were maybe 10 years old or 15 years old. And then, take a look at maybe and write them down. And you might want to do, just go into your safe place and invite that information to be shown to you, so you don't make it so much of a mental exercise as you make it an intuitive exercise. And I don't want you to stop and think about what you've written down. If something strikes you really as you're writing down a number of things, because God knows, maybe one of the things that was really valuable when you were 10 years old was being able to ride your bicycle without falling down and skinning your knees, which would have been one of the things I valued. Or being able to water the flowers in your grandmother's garden. Like, we always think we should talk about things in big picture. And what I'm suggesting to you is to look at the things that brought you joy, because they will tell you something about what you value. I loved watering my grandmother's flowers. And now I realize that the reason why I loved it is because I like to see things grow. But I also enjoyed just the beauty of the flowers. Now, as we look forward, maybe you want to do that again when you're 35 years old. Just have a look out. And do you feel, when you look at the things you value, it might come down to, guess what, a bunch of tasks that you had to do. I don't know. I'm just, I think that age 35, the thing I chose to value was myself and my well-being and my freedom. And now you might want to move on to, say, 45 or 50. What do you find was valuable to you then? I can tell you that what was valuable to me at that stage of my life was healing. And now I might cry. Healing myself after being diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder and clinical depression. And the thing I came to realize during that process was, what overwhelmed me the most was my fear that I would never accomplish anything again in my life. And it might have been the first time that I realized how important it was for me to accomplish my goals, to just accomplish something. Because sometimes we think accomplishment is just about doing, and not about being. So that whole process was about valuing parts of myself that I wasn't always clearly aware of. And so that I want to say this as an aside, that life, it is a work in progress. There is no time and no space where you may think the job is done, because it's not necessarily a job as much as it is a journey, a process. And I use the word journey knowing that it's been flogged to death over the last 20 or 30 years. So at this point in time, I can't think of another word, so it's going to have to do. And then you may move on. And like this year, as I turned 70, what I valued was the capacity to share a space and place with friends and family and dance on my birthday, because I always loved to dance. So when we're talking, and so what was, good Lord, if I could get this sentence out, I'd be dangerous. Anyways, and maybe that's because I can't really, haven't sorted out exactly what value that had for me, or what, I just know it was important. And that's the other thing. As you're writing this list, please don't analyze why you thought that was important. What everybody thinks is important is different. And that's how and so part of this process is recognizing that you're painting a picture of yourself as you do this. And you're getting in touch with what's inside you. Because all the things that in life that were important, they may have been transitory, some of them, and some of them may have lasted for your entire life. And that's okay, because we're always seeking to perform better, whatever that means. We're always trying to find ways to meet some external objective that may or may not be reflective of who you want to be or what you value. It's funny because when I thought about was mulling ideas over about what I would talk about this week, I thought, well, maybe I should talk about relationships, but it just didn't want to stick. And of course, I got a little frustrated because sometimes when I have an idea, I'm really certain that that's what I want to talk about. And if doing this podcast has taught me anything so far, is that I really don't know until the day of, until the moment before I begin, exactly what I want to talk about. That quote I gave you, I thought I was going to base an entire podcast on that quote from George Clinton. And then I realized that it really meant something to me on an intuitive level, but I couldn't really explain what it was. So I just wanted to share it with you as a jumping off point that might take you spaces and places you want to go. So as I pause, because I'm desperately searching the archives in my brain, looking for something to say after this, and the archives are not giving me anything, and my intuition isn't showing up either. So perhaps that's a sign that I could bring this to a close. So if you choose to do this exercise, please be kind to yourself. Again, this is not a time and a space or a place to be critical of yourself as much as it is to be aware of yourself. Now, that might sound like a big job, but it really isn't. We're always aware of ourselves. It's only a case of, are we paying attention? And as the events on the planet ask us to change our way of thinking and our way of being, our way of feeling, and our way of doing, it's important that we understand that we are in process of building a new structure. This is happening in the world, but it's also happening to each one of us. And many of us are fortunate enough to be able to choose that. Now, you may very well be in resistance. I know I go into resistance quite a bit myself, and often find my resistance is a sign that something is very important. I might not like it. And it reminds me of something that a spiritual teacher I once met, his name was William David, and then he changed it to Elias de Mohan. And I went to a lecture of his, or a talk, and something he said really stuck in my mind, and that is that resistance is as important to the process as acceptance is. After all, we are living in duality, and life is meant to be an experience of duality. And when we understand that, it's much easier to, let me rephrase that. We can then proceed with ease into making change, into creating a new world. Now that sounds big and grandiose, and I'm not talking in this particular moment about the entire planet. I'm just talking about each of us as individuals. So as you finish the process of looking at the things that you value and valued, you'll get a picture of yourself. And then you can ask yourself, where do I go from here? What do I do with this? And those are open-ended questions. And I would suggest that you might not know the answer right now, and you don't have to. More importantly, just opening the door, opening your consciousness is the most important thing that you can do right now. And being open to what you experience inside yourself, whether you like it or you don't, is a way of releasing and letting go. Because you cannot change something that you're not willing to acknowledge. And we all have stuff. We all have aspects and things that we may or may not like about ourselves. And I'm always tempted to ask, is that because that's what you think? Or is that because what you think other people think? That was a little bit convoluted too, which harkens back to the exercise I suggested people do. I think it was last week, I can't remember. Anyway, so as you step into this new space and place of being yourself, be kind, be celebratory, celebrate yourself. Because no matter what choices you've made in life, and I am fond of saying there's no such thing as a mistake, just a choice that has consequences you hadn't planned on. You've built something, you've built yourself, you've built your life. And we live in an extraordinary time. It's challenging, it's difficult, but it also offers unprecedented, sorry about that, didn't mean to stick my tongue out, unprecedented opportunity for building something of lasting value to you. So I want to thank you once again for joining me. Please take care. Much love. Bye-bye.